Okay. I kind of went up to Nimra Ahmed friendly 2 sessions ago. Again, some of you were here, but not everyone. So 2 weeks ago, I was talking about my own business experience, being part of a community that is great. I found very cool to research. So I've worked with gender responsibility because I have experienced gender response myself, right? And I had some strong opinions that I shared weeks ago, where I told you how shitty and how pissed it made me. Right? I was seeking help, and I would go online and find thousands of ads for research that doesn't work anymore. They just existed for 2 weeks for the research, and you will find news articles and research articles about how efficient and helpful we are, but they don't exist anymore. It were just academic thing. And I was talking about how powerful and how difficult that was each time. I was like, oh, finally, there is a solution I use. But then I found out, well, this solution is never maintained. They never lasted, and they are detrimental loss. So I always have this thing where people are like, oh, well, it's very hard. It's like academic projects. How can we actually give something back and stuff like that? So today I'm going to give you an example of a tool that we made together with the NGO that they are still using after 1.5 years. It still exists, and I quite a lot of interest using it. So we're going to stitch the slides to... Hi. No, what now? Slides 2. How many of you people here make like multiply to research or in the work or whatever? Oh, I will. It would be interesting. Okay, so I will talk about CaseCompass, which is what it looks like. And it was a very long project. It took us 2 years to actually have something that lasted. And I don't have the time to go with what we did in 2 years, but I really want to highlight what we did differently. So, my favorite question. So, obviously, there has been a very long tradition, not only in gender research, of partnering with third sector organizations, especially when it comes to address socially and politically sensitive issues. So, third sector organizations, I mean NGOs, nonprofits, community groups, etc. Right? And it makes a lot of sense because these collaborations are very beneficial, right? They give us researchers access to communities that are otherwise difficult to reach. NGOs have established trust networks. They have clients, a lot of clients. They're very strict expertise. And then they're a great site to test basically we're in the wild tools or whatever, right? If you want to test them in real world, mind goes and it's like exact, right? Like I went to this community, they tested it, they loved it. Like what do these third sector organizations and the communities actually gain from these collaborations? And answers? No. Well, the answer is actually very little. So usually these researchers benefit through publications, through career advisors, advanced advisory papers to get a PhD. You look a fancy paper of something very problematic and it's like, wow, anticipating voices community. We're like the hero, right? But the communities and TSOs are actually left with actually no trace of their participation. Fine. And even then there are like tools or integrations and protocols, they don't last because they were never meant to last. Sometimes there was like no support given, right? And that often despite the fact that these NGOs or organizations and communities are putting significant time and their resources and so much emotional labor in this, right? Difficult to NGO, say homelessness, gender response. I want to design this amazing app. It's going to solve your problems, it's going to solve your problems. Let's do this. Let's do this design thing. I have 6 months of time, right? And then you do the whole thing, right? You keep the code of your GitHub, right? You paper it's your property, the university's property, you make the design, you analyze them, right? Once a month, you will talk to them, like, what do you think about that? And it's like, yes, awesome, right? You do this, and then write up, right? I know people are going to be like, no, I shared my stuff with them, but that's not why. I have not yet met a person who was like, yes, every time I work with someone, I open share my GitHub with them, I hand it over to them, I have them open as that is it. This is not something that actually happens, right? It's not really how it works. You often focus on this publication and the impact that publications have. I'm gonna write the paper, more researchers are gonna be, they're gonna build more work on it. And maybe they in the end will have a tool that lasts, or maybe some practitioner will copy this paper and make a tool that lasts. But you're not the person, right? That's not your responsibility. You wrote the big one, right? So this is the problem that a lot of like scholars call the afterlife of deployments or of prototypes, where systems often collapse once the structure leaves because they take anything with them, right? They will take their material with them and the code with them, they could never have, and then they overflow that so that they actually can keep this up, right? Because you also don't want to have something that you just did before we publish, share it with the community. Maybe this will of it. Like, so when I was working with the NGO, and the NGO approached me with, hey, we really need a taste management system because whatever we had did not work. It was very important to me to approach this in a way that it would last, that they could still use it, and not for it to be just a prototype, which I might have thinking about. Oh, yes. So the NGO I work with is called Swiss Competence Centre Heads for Students. They're an independent non-profit organization in Switzerland that support individuals that have forced marriage or love and sexuality. Since 2001, they have supported over 4,000 individuals. Why this work? Like me, those who have here 2 weeks ago, learned that I actually thought of out at this NGO 7 years ago, and then I started working with them. At the NGO, I really got to understand how the systems, the workflows work. So they kind of really trusted me and were like, we're like half class, we're a half academic. This is something you can do. And you see, already this is very different, right? I was part of the community. The community had the need, and they were like, even the case system. Because if it came from research, this would not even be a research question, because everyone knows how to do case management. There are science tests out there, right? It's not something AI groundbreaking or whatever, right? But that's how I would call them up that question. But it was really a community that they specifically asked me to ask you, well, she's like 50% that energy of, she's 50% media. So now they were like, trust in me that whatever you do will be beneficial for us both. Right. So how did they do that? It's actually pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure all of you know that classic design thinking process, right? To do a thinking, like what are your needs, what do they need, what are the values, and you make with design, right? Build a system, we have a way to do practice. Super easy. There's really nothing here that I would like, this is something that we did very differently. However, the questions that we ask inside this workshop or structures and how we approach them are very different. So in each phase, you see, we have a lot of workshops, like 4 to 3 workshops. And the idea was that in these workshops, I don't know, you'll be together. So our research team will be together, the NGO will be together. And here, you need to make it for decisions. And here, the digital meetings has the age, right? So we would be in the meeting, of course, but it would be the NGO talking and doing, and this is what we need, and then we should do it like this. And we thought ourselves as more as a passive way, right? So we would meet for this workshop, and half-day workshops we would design, we were like, okay, first we need to do this and that and whatever. And we always acted like a workshop, passive. And that idea there was that we really had like designated time to do everything together, where they're like, okay, we can keep off time from our work, right? Because they do work, right? It's not that that's free. They're not free participants, they have nothing to do or whatever. They work at the AGO, it's like very critical work they do, right? So we really had to adjust to them when they have time. And the year would be like each week they would have one afternoon, right? So we really had to maximize how we use them or how we use them, right? So that's was the idea. We use this for child to do everything, every decision, every design decision, whatever. And between the workshops, we will facilitate. So whatever they told us to do, we will do these kind of things, right? We'll synthesize the things, the decisions they made, we will write it down nicely. So we were basically like their assistants. And this is basically how the whole process. And it was very important for us that it's not us researchers making these decisions. Right. Because in the end, of course, I worked at the NGO for a bit, but they have been doing this for 20 years. What the hell am I going to tell them? This is what you should design, or this is what you should design. Yes, of course, I know a lot about the methods, but I don't know that much about the work community, even as someone who is affected or who has worked there, right? So it was really about changing this mentality of I'm the researcher, I want to research something, I am the expert, and you come as participants to me and you give me the data, where I can make the paper, to actually, oh, you want something from us, we have the methods and we know how to do it. So we will come there and we will be little assistance and support you in doing that. It is drastically something different. It's a very different approach. So let's look at the more impressive part, which is like going more step by step. We're doing like so usually in the very first place, never you start a project, it's always about the need. Right? Like what do you need for this, the requirements that use. Right? So but it was very different. And we, of course, did all of this stuff. But it was very, very different. You could hear this. We talk about not just the needs of life, but as a system need, but we talk about the needs of what do I, as a researcher, need this collaboration for my PhD to make this piece, right? Because the university is not giving us good money ever. That's just not something that happens, right? But I know exactly if this collaboration leads to a publication, we support that, right? So we have to figure out, okay, how do we do this project so it's academically beneficial, but also that it's beneficial for the community. So we really had to sit down in the beginning and realize this is what I have to do, that it's useful for me. And they very explicitly said, but if you just say your prototype is not worth it for us. We are like losing time by participating here. So it has to be something valuable. It has to be something that lasts, or at least we can take over. Right? But we really were like, okay, what can we do? What can we do? But this also meant that we have to kind of make the boundaries. Right? For the NGO, this was like the one chance to getting everything. If you have something, as you have a researcher like, yes, let's use together. It was a huge shopping list of things they wanted. Right? Some of the stuff was not even related to the case management system anymore, right? But that was the final opportunity, or maybe like one opportunity to now have someone with that whom they could do this, and they want this, and they want this, and I had to be like, wow, you got me and 3 students. So this is the scope we can do. And I also need to finish my PhD in 2026, so maybe not a 5-year, right? Because you really have to like realistically tell them, this is what's possible, this is what we can offer, this is what we can benefit, and this not. And it was very pressing. I was having this conversation, and we had this conversation about this. They had actually worked with researchers and companies before. This is not the first time that they approached a case management system design or web part, right? But this was the first time where they felt like, oh, okay, it's very clear to us what's going to be the outcome, right? What's the outcome for Nimra and what is the outcome for us that's the NGO, right? It was not as if like, oh, we are just participant of their research, but like we are doing something else, right? So then it was very clear, okay, they need something and so let's think about it. What happens after research, right? Imagine I have my PhD done. I decide that I don't want to do anything with you guys anymore. I decided to do a postdoc in the States. Could they realistically keep the tool running? Right? Do they have the information for that? Who will have who has access to that? Who will have all the design? Is it all with me? Why? And then it became this interesting question of like, whose project is it? Is it my project where I keep all the data, or is it something that we are doing together? Right? We consider this was community. I was supporting in was like a relationship we had. For us, it was very clear that okay, you will have access to this stuff as well. It makes no sense to be like this is my data. Like it's a very different approach to adaptation. It makes you think about how are both parties benefiting and how have both parties agency over this, right? As opposed to me as a researcher coming from technology. Can I get something helping you awesome paper? I like they are not benefiting. And the argument of like I wanna write a paper and it's other people are gonna write a paper and make 20 years down there gonna be writing against people. Just like it's of course we are contributing knowledge. I hope people will smart and curious. But these people who are participating like malware research, they are not benefiting from this, right? Nor actually just like benefiting off their stories, their problems, issue, or their hopes, because right now they are not benefiting anything else. So that was very interesting. And to think about candidates who are doing this to find of our system or whatever project or really any project from murderously interviews to designing the system, instead of just defining what the point of the project is, start thinking, okay, what is the benefit I get as an academic, as a researcher? What is the benefit this community is actually getting? Because all of us, I assume, are doing this work because you really care about this topic, right? We care about what to do so that you really, I mean, you want to contribute in a positive way. And I'm not saying that anyone does it on purpose, but I think sometimes we get so like close and focus on our work environment, like the immediate team or like the deadlines or like that we often forget like, well, what is actually, am I still doing what I want to do? Am I still having the impact I want to have usually? Is really the impact you want is academics, probably only academics. I'm gonna read the NGOs and stuff like that. Would it not have more impact if people just, translate it to them instead of just focusing on the academics just so next time you are working with someone at a project, think about it. What is the benefit that you are getting, and what is the benefit that the community is getting? And even if it's just interviews, because usually what happens is you get interviews to analyze that, but you usually don't go to the community and like, hey, did you know I did this study? Maybe it's beneficial for NGOs too. Like, you don't do that. Usually you often go back to the participant webinar, like, hey, you want to see what the end result was of the study together with everything else? Usually you don't do that. So it's a bit of like, are they really benefiting? Are they as secondly? So let's review what the grammars for CaseCompass, what it should look like, what the needs are, but you can really do academically for the community right there. What's gonna happen next in the smart designing the thing. And that was also something very, very interesting or try to think of a different approach was usually I mean it also makes sense, but this is a bit of a different thing. When you design something, we often design stuff as a static thing. Like prototypes as a static thing. I like what are your current needs, what do you need it for, etc. Right? And of course there are design spaces where totally makes sense. Just look at what are your current needs, right? But for this AGO, and because it was very important for us that we keep using it on their own without us having to fix software that or that like we don't have IT to do that. It was very important for us to think about like what happens here. Is this something they can still use or not? Right? Did we design this in a way that can be extended or changed? Or did we design this in a way that was effective for 6 months? And as soon as new person starts or what like they cannot do it anymore. Right? So here we started thinking about, okay, how do we design this that it's flexible, that people can keep using it in years and years and years. Like, and he gave us this new lines look like a textile, right? Because they initially describing CaseCompass, they were like, oh, we made a tool if you would add as many input boxes as you want. I were like, oh, sometimes they need new input boxes. It would be pretty cool to have more input boxes, right? And I was like, I don't know. Someone will have 2,000 custom input boxes. I'm not sure if this makes life easier, right? But they're like, well, provided something changes, law changes, they have to change their workflow, whatever. If they want that, right? So it make us think of other design patterns, right? Because we're like, okay, this works for the next 6 months, but it won't for 2 years changes. Which was also the reason why we got attack a system like next year, right? So instead of them having like 60 things, you were like, what if you don't think about input at all? What if you have, you can just find a huge text, whatever you want, and then you can make custom tags, right? Whatever it is, like STR or any other thing. But if you would use something like that, which still powers very, very cool, right? But it also kind of helps anticipate future needs to kind of address the future needs. Then imagine we only have like these tabs, right? And we cannot add something to it or less. Then they work and actually use the tool, and someone realized, actually there should be a tab called culture stuff, right? And it would be dependent on me. They didn't have to call me again, be like, oh, are you still doing your PhD, or are you now somewhere else, or can you tell us how to do that? It's just not very big for you, right? There should be independent tables for that. So it was another kind of like design approach. They're like, okay, let's think of design patterns which allow to anticipate future needs. Which is not something that I previously done, and I could do tools and research and stuff like that. So what was very interesting, like this is the most interesting part, where a lot of tech people have actually learned something cool, is this NGO had no tech people. And I mean, they were not techy. I really think they were not techy. They like, I almost onto the screen and I was explaining to them how to make a cup of cup. And I was like, you know what? I will come by tomorrow. I will make a cup of cup. And then it's fine. Like I will explain it to you. So it was difficult for us because we really wanted them to understand the tool, have aims for the tool, be able to decide what you want to do with it. Right? If I just give you a black box, which is currently solving your problem, amazing, but you don't understand like how is it solving the problem. I think just works. If you wanted to change this or give it to someone else and be like, hey, can I make this black box to something else? And they'd be like, well, can you explain plus for black box size function so we can send it? They would be like, no, we have no idea what the hell this is, right? You just know it works, but like, and it's a case, this is not how it works. If I have to go to an engineering, I need to understand what I have to be explained, what this is, whatever, what do I even need? Right? However, they could not realistically be like, hey, even though you're not tech people, you should be involved in development. That makes total sense, right? So we thought about it. How can we design a school or like build a school in the way that even though it is us making cat positions and doing everything, that they still understand. So the solution is make a lot of tutorials and guidelines. And it's really a lot. So we thought the whole time about, okay, what's tech stacks and what is easy modules. You can really use on purpose the easiest. Like the most boring stuff, really like if I were just saying that to Kai, this is the stuff I used to be like, this is so basic and boring. Like, why would you publish that? Why then I don't understand. But for us, it was less about like, oh, we can make this fancy or publish or whatever. It was really about like, how can the NGO understand this and keep doing that, right? But it's cheap for them because the NGO is a broad as place, right? It cannot be like, this is super awesome, it has AI, but it will cost you 5,000. this is like that, right? It was very important to us to use things that didn't have like the tendency or they have lots of fees for using that. And we thought all about that, right? Because suddenly it was a project where we were very focused on like it existing in the world and not anymore a prototype, right? Paper. I would never think of this stuff and I was just like qualified for a tool for a study, right? Because you approach it, there you want to test some, improve something, and you don't think about like how is it gonna persist in the world, right? If people refuse it. And these were all the questions I had never thought about before. But here it can be important because if we hadn't done that, the thing would not have lost. Right? They do not have underscope, they don't have not used this, they would have a lot of like tech dependencies, they have no idea of it, right? And so for us, it was very important, make everything as simple as possible. Right? And make it simple and using like simple tools is my house. It was happy. So we made a 300-page manual. And I really wrote the 300, not AI, it was a 300-page manual because I had difficulties with course. So it says this German stock explanation. And this 300 document explains every tech decision in a very simple term, and also in the complicated term in case they want to do this. Understand. It also explains each of the tool, the design rationale behind it, so they understand why they do something this way and not this other way. Right? He explained to them all the functions, what they can change, or change how the system works, whatever. And we really want them to understand everything in a way that they can use the tool, that they can extend the tool. But even when I do not get around anymore, they can go with this book and be like, so we have this tool, this is all the explanation or even understand itself to have agency to decide on this. Because if you don't understand the tool, like if I give you a case and be like, yeah, did you extend this or something with no explanation? If I could not even tell you like what system it is, if it's a versatile app or you wouldn't know, right? Like you went, I don't know what to do. So for them who had no idea how to make a GitHub account, I had to make sure that they were able to have agency over it. So the 300 book was one thing of it. The second thing of it was like doing training with them. So I would go sit down with them and then do like, let's go turn on the CaseCompass, use it and stuff like that. And I don't see what they find it. I think mainly what they from like the terminal was not something they were confused. They really thought that I'm gaslighting. Oh, no, sexual rate is not, it's not that complicated. But it was difficult for them. So you made this script. You made a script for everything. Check the option at it. So if you play the script, it will open up like easy. That you made video tutorials to make sure that you really understand, right? You open this, you did this, that. But it's also useful because, of course, you did include all the members of AGO in this project. They have so much more and better stuff to do, right? But they can watch the video afterwards. They can show the next person who starts, right? It's a lot of things. Make sure that they understand, they have agency, or it also helps introduce other people to the system, like other members and stuff like that. So building justice system was not enough, right? And I think you can apply this to a lot of things, right? Like you now have a great school and you have had to solve something and you thanks it and you have a solution, but you didn't know how to explain it. It's basic code base, right? We need to understand. It does not help if it's just a tool and we want to understand how to do it. Right. So as I said, this is how CaseCompass works. Especially maybe you can create as much case as you want. You can write the interview repo. So the idea is that when they have these interview sessions with fact of women, be it over the phone or in person, they can just take large sheets of notes there, right? Just before they use the Excel sheet. Have it like an Excel sheet and a huge one, and each line would correspond to an affected individual, each tab, and would have like, I don't know, education or whatever. And horrible Excel and traumatized from Excel, so this is much better. But this will give them the opportunity to just write free text, and afterwards, depending on what other codes they created, they can tag like we do for cognitive interviews, right? And on the other side, it is summarizing code. So, for example, if you have a red code here and a red code here, and you have two codes under this, it would allow that to summarize without having this clear input and output. faith, and yeah, they're really viable. They're really lovely. They are very passionate. I have to say, they're very passionate. And you ask them for whatever, succeed with that, and like whatever you really what and we yes. Okay. So we decided what to do. We decided the tool. We built the tool. Then the question was what next, right? So usually what happens in these guys like you do a design study where you're like, oh, design this, and then it's fine, you don't have a lot of people design stuff, test it, right? So technically we design some but it's also really silly. Not tested. We have everything, right? And I think this was very, very interesting. Looking and come for evaluating these kind of things, or at least the supply that is often that you are the expert. You as a researcher come as an expert and are like, this is how we want to test it. I this data, I what adding or like without ask the NGO so they can do two participants and then test. And here we really saw deployment and evaluation as something as a joint responsibility, right? Because of course I know a lot of how to evaluate tech stuff, right? I do not know enough about how it is working there. And you have one emergency after that other emergency, right? And then the shooting tool and breaks down and whatever. And I can, yeah, of course, call them or be like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna fix it. But this is a whole level of crisis is happening there. Right? It is ethical crisis. It's a huge problem with them, right? It's even a coding and a crisis, and they're like, oh, sorry, you're fighting with that tool and someone else is discussing? No, right? Yeah, maybe academically great, right? Like that case of evaluation in NGOs, right? All we had is blah, 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 blah. But I will want to write such a paper, I will have to make sure. So what did you do? We wrote our cookbooks. They wrote down their ethical concerns and problems that could arise from their side. Very key to using this tool, the tool suddenly not working, other kinds of emergency, what actually happened in their like NGO work. And I wrote down all of the concerns I had. Like, why if our tool suddenly misgave us? Right? Like it crashed. I forgot there's a bug or whatever. But it happened. We have a bad and by people. But if you are in person system, what are you gonna do? What are the solutions? So for everything, we try to anticipate to go down the solution. So if this happens, backup plan, blah blah blah. We made sure that me and another person were available. With 24/7, our phones were on, and they could reach us. It's something happened. I actually only paused twice, never at night, and pretty good job. But it was very nice because for them, they felt like they're so much more relaxed to actually test this or even dare to test this because otherwise they would not test it. Right? So if they would be like, oh, this is just a bad, like two we saw online, a lot of high states made from testing it because they're so worried that what if it goes wrong, right? But now they knew that there are two people behind the scenes they can call, and there is going to be a solution, right? Usually, if you have a system or whatever, I've never seen someone call a tech trades for police not wasting right? But them knowing that they can do that helped them so much more. They were really much more relaxed, they kept saying. They were so much more relaxed. I had to think about like how to like police in the paper or whatever. And if it's useful, so I was like, hey, it can do it like this can also do widget. Like how texting about what was and A themselves have stuff about how school life that would have to be different in the next situation. So in the whole thing from the beginning to the end, it was always a shared thing. Right? It was not me coming to a community. I'm gonna do this for that paper. It was always like you guys think I think it's just me and one free. And of course, a lot of people tell me that, well, maybe you can just do that because you were at the NGO, and you were in the factory, and of course, I'm not denying that. Of course, care and abandonedness, like me being part of it, Although like A plus B, I automatically have introduced to academia because I need my PhD, and to them because I love them. I like they are like community. But I don't think that we need to have the same positionality as I. A lot of time when you do this research, fear and embeddedness can also come by us building this relationship with people, right? Instead of just being like, I need now 5 study women so they can come to study or whatever. What can you do for the 5 Maybe to build this relationship with this community, I see what their problems are, see what their needs are, and actually try to like address what this 5 need, right? And you can build this up even if you're not part of the community, right? You can start going to that. Yes, all right, you can have genuine talks, you can show up to their events, whatever. And you can build this shared embeddedness even if you are not part of the community, but you have to genuinely fight, right? And I feel like a lot of times this is missing when you are doing research. Nowadays in academia, especially when it comes to like social justice research and stuff like that, you have such an academic view on everything that we forget actually dealing with the community and what the community needs. However, this is also different, right? I have had crash outs the last 2 weeks because I'm submitting my dissertation next week, right? And everyone is keeps saying like dissertation is so great, you have been so great, right? Yes, academically, sure, but I don't know. I feel like I haven't done enough for my community. I feel like yes, I would get a PhD from academia because I came back to this amazing college, but besides looking enough for the community, I don't know. Angel says this, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like no. I wish I would have been more at a place or have like, oh, I did enough for experience for me to get the PhD, but also enough for the ATO. But maybe it's something that is like enough. But yes, I hope some of you can finish your PhD or work and end up with saying it was beneficial to you, but also to the community. So what does research time? I have this text I wrote in my outside university actually, and there is a too often academic projects in communities with little beyond the basis of participation. Our researchers support with publications and career benefits, but have not predicted feminist and design justice scholarship as effective and structurally unjustified. So all of us, when we have these technologies, we just expect communities who we keep saying are marginalized and vulnerable suddenly have resources to go off, right? So a lot of time when we work with communities, we make a huge point. They are marginalized. They have hardly any resources. And society is super shitty to them. And then you are also shitty to them. We're like, hey, here you go. I know they have no resources. Figure it out, right? You feel measure research and our attention shifts back to like mathematics. Hey, I put that right there. So the attention is not to, oh, what is happening at school? You kind of like, it was a means to an end, and less like it's continuing on, right? And I thought like you that this whole thing, no, this is a breakup that happens, and it is a failure of care, right? The subject has those people who are least able to absorb it, who has the least resources, who we keep saying are vulnerable, who are we tell them to take care of this stuff, right? This is your burden to figuring out whatever. By being it faith, basically. And this is why we need open active. Are we actually doing something that benefits the community, or are we please? We say we are doing our care, but that care is actually just for us and our academic endeavors, right? Or success. And I've done this work since 6 years. I'm not saying that I do all of that work. I can get this a huge area thing, right? I can still wear like people can all the sort. But I would like to talk about some of the approaches that I feel like have helped me look at research not just a means to an academia, but actually something that can have social impact for communities, right? plus X. But yes, then in the beginning, design is never usual. Every design process shapes power, resources, execution, and whose needs are prioritized, the researchers or the communities. I can apply this exact logic to that. So rather than treating design as a production of artifacts for research or labor, these approaches ask us to return to the political roots of design by asking how research and design can contribute to more equitable and accountable futures. So you don't think about research as the I'm going to produce knowledge for idea, or how can you use research to benefit the world or a more accountable future, more just future for a broader social change. And there are like three commitments that I feel like have that have helped me a lot. Sorry. So one thing is community-led design. Really for us in the community what happened. I am so part of amazing example is you know how there is research on menstrual health and there is a lot of apps on menstrual health and we'll stop making the thought that apps menstrual health and tracking. I actually disagree, right? I want to just ask you, but I want to just ask Reddit, he will tell you we don't need this app that need something else, right? And I would say that that comes from a lot of things. I feel like a lot of these problems we have nowadays would have been solved with people who just ask and not like assume what they do, right? And I really think community-led design is really a way for us to be solving and addressing the right question, right? What are the actual needs of the community? What are their priorities? And how does the community already have approaches, right? Do they already have ideas, right? If they have been doing this for 20 years, I promise you, they have figured out sneaky ways to do this thing without technique. Like you have been surviving for years. They don't need an external person who decide and choose to tell about me. He didn't go. We think it's the dogs. It's like really not. Just not it. Really affects the other types. Really. Do you think they have been doing this for 20 years for fun and are just like fulfills the laws or whatever? No, they have strategies. Like these people are nursing such a complicated Excel sheet, but we worked for them, right? We manage to make it work. So they do have knowledge about what works and what's not, right? So instead of forcing our knowledge on them on practices, as asking what is what you already do, what has worked, what has not worked, what do you actually need, right? That whenever we do projects, we start talking about sustainability, right? So if you have great tools, who is going to have agency over it? Who is going to do it, adapt it? Whose responsibilities? I gave you responsibility further to the NGOs to share. And I want to highlight, it's not just about tools, right? I think generally, I'm sure I was maybe comment as content research outcome. You can do this even if you don't have tools. For example, I have done a lot of interview studies, and after each interview study, I do free workshops to all anime children, the NGOs who want to have workshops. So I can explain to them what I have found, so you can actually do this right now for NGO, because they don't have time to do right now, right? But what they can do is support me in my research, and I come back and okay, this is what I found out, and you can do this and that, whatever, right? So they had an immediate benefit out of it, right? And so, really, it's not enough just from the paper because even when I'm giving myself, I'm like, what the hell are we talking about? Why is this so complicated? And I am the last word patient student. So if I give this like that to them, they will not understand, right? But there's so many other ways to make your research understandable. There are many, right? You can make a Z. People have read themes over their research so other people understand. I've seen people make comics over it. I've seen people make workshops over it. I had people actually make tools based on think and goal based to like, hey, these are some tools that were outcomes of my research. Would you be interested in doing this, right? Nothing is holding me back from making tools to go into the community and be like, this is something your community wants to keep using. Nothing is keeping you from it, genuinely. Nothing is keeping you from, oh, I made a banner paper, maybe I should make a little comic up and go and give it away. Like, they would probably be happy. All of them have been so happy when I had started, right? And lastly, I keep talking about the community deciding, the community being the expert, and all. So what it needs for the research, right? Because you keep talking that the not two experts, but I'm thinking like we need to start thinking about different these areas, what the role of the researchers, right? It's not like savior, it's not that person who comes and says solves your problem on the external or whatever. Maybe it is more about being a academic accomplice. So how can we use our privileges, our resources, our powers, our institutions in service of the communities, right? So, for example, I've read the whole thing of the last few years. He really think about how can I use this stage in which I want to do this community affects new inspires the community to actually help the community. Right? Projects that I have done with this mainly are so much different than I would have done otherwise. Of course, I can do a happiest keep on AI for gender discourse. Do you know the funding I would be getting? I would be getting so much funding, right? And I also think our conferences would be like amazing too. We use AI. But this is not it. Also, honestly, this is not the way I think I can have a social impact of it. It is really by just going to them with like how can I be a thing? I have these resources, I'm doing this work, right? I will get my PhD. So might as well just ask you, how can I help? Right? As opposed to like, I have a PhD, I'm an expert, I'm gonna say to you, I'm gonna solve your problems. And a lot of times they aren't. Like they're not gonna get the immediate benefit. So yes, about these three things. And with that, I think I'm getting one more thinking. This is all I have to say today. Thank you, Nimra.
And one of them was sustainability.
So it was teach the most inspirational subclass.
So I see it can also benefit.
Yeah,
During something.
like that actually was a very much success. No, I'm gonna tell you, so NGO is still using it since a year. We're very happy, and we helped them hire a tech person. So now they took it over. So it's like we are not doing anything with it. Cool. And but academically, it was also very much successful because people were like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Right? Like they could learn how I made a board. This is not science school. Really not. Max QDA exists. I just like. But it made it much more about okay, the research question is not how can we move tool. Research question is more how can this last a social change. It's like even when you focus not like social impact doesn't mean that it can't be useful. I think you just have to stand why you just have to stand by it. I care. So I'm gonna find a way to like push this through academia instead of like academia help back that it might well like this is what changed. Oh yeah. Very we got that something that questions. Something that questions. Need your bigger part. Well, it's your bigger part. Full project. I think after we have educated the day, you didn't this deployment and we tested developed like, hey, this is all the materials, and you keep using it. It's not good stuff, isn't it? Sometimes it's the first you to be eating. And I like periodical years, like once a month, you keep they sad over it. Like it is insane. Like it makes me so happy and I keep thinking, right, this is the most important thing. Like really it is not the advanced or whatever. But they were so happy about it, right? And it was really like this KPCD sometimes it's almost pops in the ball. It's just bright. Why I don't know if an AI tool that could highlight some of his figures would have been more useful. I guess academically it will like wow, it is possible. But I feel like in the real world, sometimes like, we'll see. maybe serialization or impact can be. Yeah, super cool projects. I think what I was listening from you was like, were there some custom features to the software aside from an off-the-shelf case study? And like, what was the sort of, I don't know, in business, we talk about like a build or buy decision, right? So in the end, if they had to hire a tech person to kind of maintain that, I assume they are fulfilling other functions as well. Is that then more costly to the NGO than just buying, licensing something off the shelf for the support? So the thing was, say I had case management system that they got from the business support thing, but it just didn't work for them. It was not what they wanted. It was not like for the workflow. It was your whole work is like crisis oriented, unflexible, or it requires something else. So having really structured thing, the a lot of case management systems we're giving them are not. And then they get to hire a design company or like a software company. But they were so set on like this is what you need, this is what you need. And we kept telling them like, no. And they just didn't like exactly just punch through that. And they made all this like it's a complicated thing that they didn't miss. Like they were like, we don't know what to do with this thing. Like you don't understand its process so much, and then you'll miss it. And before, when they did it with us, of course, it was all free. Right? I couldn't pay anything for that at all. But then also for like accuracy rate higher right now, it's really more the target person who's very exact, like air, something happen, stuff like that. Not someone who's building it further. They're really happy with something like that, but they will have like the future, and if they want to do so. It was much easier for you to maintain and run locally, just their saying why they didn't have to work with 5 other NGOs, right? And they could do it. So it was so super simple, but so specific to their proposals. This I don't think this exactly can work for another agent. I cannot just speak to them, right? Because even if you're like multiple tabs and stuff like that, it was very focused into like how they have to do it. The benefits were pretty much like what they got something called A. They had specific visions. They got it for C, but of course they took about flavors of it, but they did not have to do that. And then we were looking for like text edit for us, it was like as cheap as possible and as easy as possible. Right? We did not lose tools and cost them too much. Ever. And for even after all, it does better if there are some fundings that you have a say to you. A practical is mainstream and us as an angel. Not a lot, but still they have like a corporation that is saying that something per hour they could access. They really had a flat and you should not have and someone's to prefer doing